The Bible was heavy, not because of its size, but because of what was inside. On the morning of October 17, 2014, Margaret Collins picked it up from her late sister's dresser in a small home in Waco, Texas. She thought it was just another relic of faith, the kind of Bible her sister Lydia carried to every Wednesday service at St. Mark's Baptist Church. She thought it was just leather and scripture. But when it slipped from her hands and landed with a hollow thud, a folded photograph spilled onto the floor. The photo showed a smiling girl, no older than 10, her arm draped over another child Margaret didn't recognize. On the back, in Lydia's handwriting, were the words, "Forgive me, Lord." He knows. Lydia had been dead for 3 weeks. Everyone had said it was a sudden stroke. The obituary in the Waco Tribune-Herald called her a pillar of the community. Pastor Daniel Hartwell, the town's most respected figure, delivered her eulogy at the packed church on September 28, 2014. He assured everyone she was with the Lord, but the Bible told another story. Folded slips of paper were tucked into Psalms and Proverbs. They weren't prayers, they were confessions. He visits when no one is here. If I speak, he will destroy me. I cannot breathe under the weight of this sin. And in the book of Revelation, Daniel is not who he seems. Margaret sat frozen. Pastor Hartwell had baptized half of Waco. He'd prayed with governors, visited Baylor University students in the hospital, blessed businesses on Austin Avenue, and stood on courthouse steps during charity drives. He was the face of faith, but Lydia's words pointed to a predator. Over the next week, Margaret dug deeper. In the church basement, a stone-walled room not listed on the official blueprints, she discovered a hollowed-out Bible containing a black leather ledger. Names, dates, amounts, payments marked, silenced, handled, gone. The entries stretched back to 1998. Margaret carried it straight to the Waco Police Department, but Pastor Hartwell's power ran deep. Chief Harold Dorsey, a man baptized by Hartwell himself, called her into his office. Closing the blinds, he leaned forward. "You're grieving, Margaret," he said in his gravelly drawl. "You don't know what you're stirring up. This church built this town. Hartwell married me, buried my parents. He is this community. Drop it." When she refused to answer, his voice hardened. "You push this any further, and you'll end up like your sister. Do you understand me?" The ledger vanished into an evidence locker. No charges followed. That night, Margaret noticed a car idling at the corner of her street. The next day, 2 men in plain, nondescript clothing followed her from the grocery store to her home. Their movements were practiced, mechanical. Twice that week, she was chased, once on a quiet side road near Lake Waco, where she barely made it into a neighbor's yard as the men drove off. Another time, in the parking lot of Richland Mall, where she ran into the crowd before they could reach her. It was clear now, Hartwell wasn't working alone. Chief Dorsey's men were watching her, ready to silence her. Desperate, Margaret sought help outside Waco. She reached out to Ellen Price, a senior investigative reporter for Texas Monthly. They arranged to meet at midnight in a deserted diner on Interstate 35 to avoid prying eyes. Ellen arrived with a tape recorder hidden in her purse, and Margaret slid the Bible, notes, and copies of the ledger across the table. Ellen listened quietly, then said, "This story won't be buried. I'll print it." On November 12, 2014, Texas Monthly published Ellen S. Bombshell Expose, Whispers in Waco, Ledger links beloved pastor to church cover-up. And the floodgates opened. Families who had stayed silent for years began to speak. Emily Sanchez, just 15 in 2002, came forward. She had become pregnant, naming Hartwell as the father. Within weeks, the baby was gone in a private adoption arranged by the church. Her family had received an envelope of cash to keep quiet. Angela Morris, now 30, revealed she had been 16 when Hartwell groomed her. Pregnant at 17, she was told it was God's will and quietly sent to relatives in Abilene. Her child was raised under another name. The ledger listed her initials beside handled, and Rachel Dunn, once a bright high school senior in 2007, testified that Hartwell promised her a church-funded scholarship. When she turned up pregnant, he told her parents she had seduced him. The shame crushed her family. They moved to San Antonio. Her initials were next to gone. Each story tore through the community. The man trusted most had preyed on its daughters. And all the while, Chief Harold Dorsey had helped bury the complaints, protecting his pastor cousin and covering up evidence. By December 2014, Hartwell vanished. He slipped out of Waco, moving between motels and Temple, Killeen, and College Station. Congregants smuggled him food and cash, insisting he was being persecuted. For weeks, he evaded capture. But on January 8, 2015, at Dallas Union Station, plainclothes officers spotted a man in a worn coat clutching a one-way ticket to El Paso, headed toward the Mexican border. When they called his name, he bolted into the crowd. He nearly made it to the platform before a detective tackled him hard to the concrete. His Bible flew from his coat pocket, pages scattering across the station floor. This time, there were no secrets hidden inside. The trial opened in July 2015 at the McLennan County Courthouse. It was the most watched case Waco had ever seen. Families filled every seat. Reporters lined the benches. Margaret sat in the front row, Lydia's Bible in her lap. The jury heard everything: the ledger, the testimonies of women silenced as teenagers, the notes Lydia had hidden before her death. Chief Dorsey's role was laid bare: his threats to Margaret, his men tailing her, his obstruction. He resigned in disgrace, later indicted for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. On August 14, 2015, the verdict was unanimous: guilty. Daniel Hartwell was sentenced to life in prison without parole at Huntsville Unit. Harold Dorsey received 15 years for obstruction and conspiracy. Families wept as the gavel fell. For the first time, they had been heard. For the first time, the Bible wasn't a weapon against them, but for them. Margaret felt the weight lift from her chest. She had carried her sister's whispers into the light, and in that courtroom, they became thunder. As Hartwell was led away, he glanced back at the congregation he once commanded. For decades, he had hidden behind scripture, but the very pages he corrupted became the evidence that destroyed him. And Lydia's final words, scrawled in her Bible, echoed through the courtroom like judgment itself: Daniel is not who he seems.